As the years go by in the Madden NFL series, we see features come and go, sometimes for good reason, sometimes for bad reason, and every year as a new Madden approaches, we always see a lot of the same questions asked from the fans. Hey, how come we don't have such and such feature that used to be in the game so many years ago? Hey, it would be cool if we could see this come back to the game. This should have never left the game. And what a lot of people don't realize is that some of these features go away because the NFL simply doesn't want them in the game. Now, I do plan to do an entire updated video on everything that the NFL did ban from Madden coming up very soon, where I'm going to go a lot more in depth with more updated information on what was left out of the game because of the NFL. But the thing with that list is that there are a lot of things on that list that kind of teeter on the fence and do have a chance of coming back into the game. Some of those things that have been, requested to be removed by the NFL will likely be back in the game one day. But there are 3 things in particular that will likely never, and I mean never, come back to the game. And that's what I wanted to talk about in today's video, because we can get these 3 out of the way and you can stop asking about them, because as much as we would love these back in the game, the NFL just as simply is not having it. So I'm going to touch on these 3 things. I'm going to take some information from this Sports Illustrated article from a while back that kind of has a little, good bit of information in it. And I'm also going to give some of my thoughts on it as well. So number 1 on this list is the C word, and that is concussion. Now, this one kind of goes without saying. This one is kind of common sense, I would say. We could easily understand why the NFL doesn't want concussions in the game. I mean, they're trying to distance themselves from the word as much as possible. Now, yes, in real life, they don't necessarily shy away from the word. You hear it mentioned on, NFL broadcasts maybe, multiple times a week even. You see players go into concussion protocol all the time and don't return to the game because they didn't pass concussion protocol, and sometimes they miss a game or 2. So it's not that they're necessarily shying away from the word, but they're trying to do everything to kind of distance themselves from all the bad that comes with it, right? They get sued by players after they retire, so they're trying to do everything to keep the players, in their words, from being injured or being, more so harmed by keeping them out of the game and making sure to test these players when they think that they could have a concussion. But now when it comes to the Madden game, that is an area that they can completely control and say, hey, we can't make concussions cease to exist in real life, but we can make them cease to exist in Madden, and that is what they've done. Now, part of this was obviously because they don't like the word and they don't want the word associated with their brand more than it has to be, but there were also some other factors with this as well. So what the Sports Illustrated article on this says, it wasn't difficult to see the rising tide of concussion issues in the mid-2000s, and everyone involved in making Madden, EA, the NFL, and even John Madden himself, had thoughts on how to address it in the game. We were already making changes to concussions. We wanted them to be more realistic, says a producer. The NFL got wind of that, so we ended up working together. They provided us with concussion data so we can model the frequency of concussions in Madden after the real-life averages. The language used when describing injuries, head or otherwise, also changed late in the last decade as EA began using more vaguer descriptions that better reflected the actual knowledge people would have of an injury moments after it had just occurred. For a while, the game would say, your player sprained his back and he's out for 6 weeks, 2 plays after he sustained the injury. But in real life, guys don't get diagnosed until they get an MRI, just like the NFL doesn't formally diagnose concussions at the game. So we adjusted the phrasing to say things like head injury instead. The producer doesn't remember if it was the NFL or John Madden himself who requested that change, but he did say that Madden was vocal about making adjustments as a result of increased concussion awareness, even going so far as to record new, more appropriate audio commentary. John had his own concerns, says a producer, so he asked us to change the lines he spoke in the game to be more sensitive to the issue. Now, again, that's why you have concussion protocol in the game, because they can't 100% say for sure if you have a concussion until you get an MRI done, but they can put you through a series of tests and say, hey, there's probably a good chance you do have a concussion, we can't let you go back in the game. But when you're playing a game of Madden, you don't really have these things happen. If you're just playing a one-off game, or even if you're in a franchise, you'll have the results after the game. But for a long time in Madden, they would say right after your player got injured, like, yep, he's going to be out for this long, he got this injury. When in reality, they could pretty much almost guarantee that injury might be possible, but nothing is official until they run the proper test to say for sure. So part of the reason concussions went away was because of that, but also the other part is while the concussions were making such headlines in the real world, it was easy for the NFL to just say, hey, let's just call them head injuries and let's not ever have concussions in the game again. So you do still see the head injury term used in Madden, but you really see it very far and few between. Those guys that play franchise will tell you don't see it happen quite too often because it's not something they want to draw a lot of attention to. Now, number 2 on this list of things that we will likely never see in Madden again kind of goes hand in hand with the concussion. This is another really big thing that people miss, and that is helmets popping off of players. Now, the hit stick is, one of the best features Madden ever had, and laying a successful hit stick is probably one of the most satisfying feelings in Madden. But when you lay a hit stick so perfect that you would knock a helmet off, that was just like the icing on the cake. That was the exclamation point on everything. And that was one of fans' favorite thing to see in a game. Like, hey, I knocked the guy's helmet off. Because we see it happen in real life pretty often. But, again, the NFL, while they didn't like the concussions, they also didn't like the game being too violent. And while some of the hit sticks are a little violent, if you notice, as a whole, they're not as violent as they used to be. Because there used to be a lot more gruesome hit sticks where players' necks would just literally snap back. And it really would be pretty crazy, and we don't see those happen too often in Madden anymore. We do see big hits, but we don't see people's necks snapping back, and we do not see helmets popping off. Here in the Sports Illustrated article, they said, helmet popping tackles used to be a back-of-the-box staple back in the N64 and PS2 days, but they haven't been seen in Madden since 2006. Their disappearance was much due to technical difficulties as to league displeasure. So it says here, when the last console transition happened, when they switched from PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3 and Xbox to Xbox 360, we completely rewrote the game. In the process, we literally lost the technology that allowed the helmet to pop off. A big part of the challenge was that we had to give a player hair when his helmet popped off, making the animation more complicated than it might seem. There were a lot of moving pieces involved, and it happened infrequently, so we just said, this isn't a priority. But when EA was settled into the new generation of consoles and tried to add the animation back into the game, the NFL put the banhammer down on it. The NFL was not happy with the helmets popping off. In fact, they were happy when they weren't able to include it in the console switch. But when the feature was ready to be brought back, the NFL said, we're not having it. They would not allow them to do it. So the NFL was actually happy that they couldn't add it when they switched console generations, which is, kind of funny. They were like, good, we don't want it in the game anyway. But then EA's like, hey, we're ready. We got the technology back. We want to add this back in the game. NFL said, no, slow your roll. We don't want this gruesome, these violent hits in the game. We're trying to distance ourselves from this as much as possible. So as much as we would love to see the helmets pop off, we're never going to see that back in the game again. It's just not going to happen. Now, number 3 on the list is the thing that I would like to see back most out of these 3. The helmets popping off is a big one too, but this last one, in terms of immersion, is such a big deal. And this is something that other sports games are able to do because, the other leagues aren't as picky as the NFL. And that is dynamic attendance, or lack thereof. So basically, you've seen complaints year in and year out. I know I've seen them. People say, why aren't the stadiums ever empty? Why are bad teams constantly have a sold-out stadium? You could literally go into a franchise, go 0-16 for 3 years straight, and your stadium will still be packed, not a single empty seat. You could be 0-10 in your season, and you're, late in the year, you're in a, 2-degree weather, it's snowing. Like, all these things would factor in attendance. Okay, the team is terrible, it's snowing, it's cold. People probably aren't going to the game. It's not selling out, but yet every single seat is packed. And that's because the NFL does not like seeing empty stadiums in the game. Not really so much even the NFL, but more so the owners are what complained about this. So here in the Sports Illustrated article, it says, seems that keeping the game faithful to the real-world product isn't always in the league's best interest. Being that both the developer and the league were ever striving for greater realism, EA added a logical feature in Madden 11, dynamic attendance. With this, stadiums in-game would be as populated as their real-life counterparts, or, as it were, unpopulated. We incorporated accurate attendance for all teams, and Jacksonville always had these terrible turnouts, says one producer. The Jags owner got all pissed off when he heard that they were empty seats when you played as his team in the game. The team called the NFL, and we had to fix it immediately. The league did not understand the value of a dynamic attendance in what is marketed as a simulation game, though they were seemingly at a loss for the best way to satisfy both interests, adds a different producer. There is a direct link between attendance and blackouts on TV, and the league recognized the fact that dynamic attendance was important in the context of franchise mode and a team not doing well. Jags games don't ever sell out. We reflected that in-game, and we were immediately asked not to remove the dynamics, but also not have half-empty stadiums. In other words, Madden is as real as it can be without being too real. So, if you've played other games, like for me, I play a lot of NBA 2K, and when I'm in my franchise, if I'm trying to rebuild a bad team, and they've been bad for years, and we're starting the season out, arena's not full, and especially maybe the first 10 games, maybe we're hovering around 500, arena's still not filled out, and then as the team starts doing better, you start to gradually see that arena fill out, and it's a cool feeling because it immerses you in the game. But not only little things like that, but let's say even if your team is good, you could be the number 1 seed in the league, but let's say you're having a game where you're just you're going up against the Golden State Warriors, and they're on their A game that night, and they're just blowing you out. They're just having one of those Golden State Warriors moments, and it's the fourth quarter, maybe midway through, and you're just down 20. The arena is going to be like half empty. People are heading for the parking lots. They're like, okay, this ain't our night. Let's go beat the traffic. That's realistic. You want to see that in a game because that's what you would see in real life, but we just don't have the benefit of seeing that in Madden anymore because the owners were, picky and said, hey, I don't want my stadium to be empty. Well, your stadium's empty in real life because your team is some garbage right now and they ain't doing good. So maybe get your team better and then your stadium will be filled in Madden. But I digress. I feel like that's one of the more goofier ones because it's just a video game at the end of the day, but these people take their brands very seriously and they don't want anything negatively, reflecting their brand. So those are 3 things that we are never going to see back in Madden. Let me know how you feel about these below, and let me know some other features that we still don't have back that you would like to see back. And as always, subscribe if you are new, turn on that bell notification to stay up to date on the latest Madden 20 news, and I will see you guys next time.